Welcome to my 23rd video in my 30-day challenge. In this video, we're going to be listing the erroneous assumptions that were made by other hypotheses that are limiting their chances of success. Hi, my name is Eduardo Hernandez. I am the creator of Emergent Chemical Evolution, the latest theory in the origin of life. I'm also the author of the book by the same name that's available on all major online retailers. Let's get with it. All right. One of the main things that made me successful in solving this problem was that I went back to first principles. First principles meaning way back to the basics, the molecular basics, the original articles written by the Nobel laureates in discovering the fundamentals of life. The articles on how we determine DNA was the molecule of heredity, how Francis and Crick determined the structure of DNA, how they determined that viruses existed, how they determined how they self-assembled, how they determined the structure of proteins, how everything commenced, the molecular structure of the cell membrane. I went back to study all of those without being filtered by college level, university level texts, where the author of the text would translate what the article of these Nobel laureates were trying to say. I went back and actually read them, and a large majority of them contained in this book, Molecules to Living Cells, an anthology assembled by the Scientific American magazine. I bought this book way back in 1987, and I read it then. And, you know, it sparked my fascination with working in science and the search for the answer of how life started. When I first read that book, they had a couple articles in there that convinced me that scientists had already reached a sure conclusion on how life started. I was disavowed of that assumption years later, which led to me pursuing this goal of solving this problem. And that's how I began this process, learning that from my philosophy class that they hadn't discovered how life originated, that it wasn't a foregone conclusion that life started from inanimate matter. So back in 2004, that became my new mission in life, was to solve this problem. And it took me a good 10 to 14 years to get to the mechanism, and then 16 years to find the actual original source and first molecule of life. Anyway, let's get down to the list. The first erroneous assumption was that the oceans were basic, homogeneous, that they were of a single type of environment, that everywhere in the oceans it was the same pH, and the average pH was important. In my theory, of course, we speak of the importance of pH gradients being formed in different layers of the ocean. So we'll discuss that in another video. The second assumption, erroneous assumption, was that a single self-replicating molecule initiated life. And that in itself, for one molecule to replicate itself is a very tall order. And we have no evidence in any mechanism in life that ever occurred. The third assumption was that a lipid cell membrane was necessary to initiate life, to protect the molecules and to concentrate them enough for something to happen. Of course, my theory totally blows that out of the water. Again, all these assumptions I'll be taking up in future videos. The continuing videos after this one, each assumption will be addressed in one single video, because there's a lot to unpack in these assumptions. The fourth assumption was that viruses originated from cells, that cells came first and then the viruses are genetic junk that spontaneously came out of a cell. That is in itself an assumption that is hard to overcome because of the means and ways we've discovered viruses as disease-causing agents. So they couldn't see beyond that, beyond the name, because virus means poisonous liquid. Viruses perfectly fit between molecular size molecules to in between cells, and that space in between, viruses perfectly fit. Like I said, we'll unpack that in another video. The fifth erroneous assumption is that homeostasis was necessary to initiate life. And again, in my theory, we discuss how the environment can create conditions that show that was not necessary. Besides the fact that modern life inhabits all types of different environmental conditions, that homeostasis for one organism is not the same as for others. So that wasn't necessarily the case that we need one singular type of homeostasis. The sixth erroneous assumption is that life occurred randomly, that it was just a random event, and that it wasn't something that would have come out. I believe that random events did occur that made life possible, but I believe that with certain conditions, life is inevitable, according to my theory, and that it wasn't just one random event. It was a series of statistically possible favorable events occurred, and that it wasn't just random chance. That once you have certain conditions, life is inevitable. And we'll again unpack that in another video. And the seventh erroneous assumption of other hypotheses is that once chromosomes are formed, a life form or a lineage could change the chromosomal structure to evolve into another organism. That's a very, very big jump for any organism to take that is untenable. And again, something that needs to be totally unpacked in its own video. So that's the list of erroneous assumptions that, if not corrected by other hypotheses, make them unable to solve this problem. By me throwing out all dogmas, all assumptions from other theories that I read, and assumptions made by articles that I read from these researchers, the only way that I was able to solve this problem was to throw out those assumptions. Start from first principles and ignore those assumptions and just follow where the evidence led me. I hope you stay tuned. Give me a like, subscribe to my channel, see my other videos. I'm having a great time making these videos. I'm glad I made this challenge to myself of one video per day for 30 days. I hope you stay till the end, and I'll see you next video.